Welcome to Baby Boomer Tales. I'm Jim. Happy New Year. The first day of the first month of 2025. Time flies, doesn't it? It does. It's amazing. Today we are talking about firsts, since it's the first day of the year. So we'll talk about things like the first school you ever went to, your first teacher, your first friend, your first bike, your first kiss, or your first girlfriend, for me, boyfriend if you're a female. Before we get into that though, I have to explain a little something about last week. I don't know if you noticed, I noticed these things. There were patches in some of the audio last week. I was just talking along and that was okay, but when I went back for the first edit, there were about 3 places in there that it sounded like the old dial-up internet, how that terrible sound of screeching cats. It just started playing. I don't know where that came from, how it picked it up. I was using my new microphone, which I had put away about 2 years ago. I got it a couple years ago, tried it out for a while, and I didn't like it. It was too sensitive. It seemed to pick stuff up. So I don't know if it was hearing something I could not hear, which is very likely because I don't hear a lot of things anymore. But it was there and it was just loud. So I have gone back to my old microphone. I don't even know why I tried that new microphone again. It is, quote, better, newer, shinier, little more high-tech, but not that much, I didn't think. I like this old one, but I had an issue with it didn't quite sound right to me last time I used it, which was a couple weeks ago. And that's prompted me to use that new mic, but I don't know. Nothing like those screaming cats getting killed or whatever that sound is, that awful sound. So, that's what we've got going. That's what we did. That's where we are. I had one more thing I was going to talk about on this monologue, and I thought of it, and then I forgot to write it down. You ever do that? It seems like as I get older, that happens. Now, last night for New Year's Eve, I celebrated with the wife about 7 or 8 o'clock, I don't know. Happy New Year, kiss each other on the cheek, and stumble off to bed. I'm at a time in my life where it's hard to stay awake, and yet I go to bed and it's hard to really sleep. When I was a teenager, I could sleep like the dead. I mean, I was out like a light. Apparently, Kim got up about 3:30 this morning, and when I got up, stumbled out of bed around 5, she was in another bedroom in the house, and she told me she got up because our window right by the bed, it's like a story above the basement, and she said it sounded like something was killing something out there. Now, I had spotted our bobcat yesterday or the day before. I hadn't seen him for a while. The last time I saw him, we were having a rabbit population, and that bobcat must have brought that population down. Now, yesterday when I spotted him, he was going up my driveway towards the road, and that's, a couple blocks maybe from the house to the road, and I could see rabbits scurrying away, but he wasn't paying any attention to them. So I don't know if he got a possum or a raccoon or a bunny or something last night, or if it was something else, like a coyote. I didn't hear it, but that is nothing new. Is that what I was going to talk about? I don't know. let's go back to our first, though. You know, it's an adventure living out in the country. It is. Now, you live in the big town, you have enough adventures of your own, and they're different than my type of adventures. I have lived in Kansas. In a couple weeks, I will have lived here for 37 years. That's half of my life. Amazing. I still consider myself a Colorado boy, and yet I've lived in Kansas as long as I lived in Colorado. Actually, a little longer, because when I was little, we lived in California for about 3 or 4 years. We've lived in this house 25 years, which is approximately 1/3 of my life. Where does the time go? How fast does it go? I am amazed. Okay, back to first. The first state in the United States, anybody guess this? You know, it's one of the 13 colonies, right? Delaware. Delaware became the very first state in 1776. I didn't even think they became states until after the war. Shows how much I know about our history. And I'm kind of a history buff. I mean, I like to study things about our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and the American Revolutionary War, and all this stuff. The first person in space was John Glenn in 1962. Here's one from a little older, 1869, the first transcontinental railroad. It was the Central Pacific Railroad and the Union Pacific Railroad. They joined is from one coast to the next. In San Bernardino, California, the first McDonald's opened in 1955. Here's one that's very important, maybe a thing that changed the world forever for mankind. In 1857, a man named Joseph Gaiety invented toilet paper. He called it medical paper, and basically before that, using your hands to wipe your butt was not out of the ordinary thing. And they didn't have antibacterial soap either. Oh, gross, huh? Now, we all used to take toilet paper for granted until the big lockdown of 2020, and all of a sudden, you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere. Thank you, Joseph Gaiety. One of the most important inventions of mankind right there. The first humans to fly. Well, not flapping their arms, not in an airplane. It was in a hot air balloon in Paris in 1783. For that, people tried to fly. You know, you see Da Vinci's sketches of how a man could fly and all that stuff. 1783. Couple guys went up in a hot air balloon. My first school was in my little hometown in Colorado. That little hometown I talk about all the time, 8,000 feet above sea level in the Rocky Mountains in north central Colorado. Little town of 500 people. My first school teacher was Mrs. Harrison. I can remember her name. But my most memorable first teacher was Mrs. H, I'll call her. Since I am in the spirit of not using people's last names unless I had no other choice, I kind of am in touch with her daughter, Karen, to this day. She lived on a ranch outside of town over by the YMCA. It was like a boys' camp for summer. My first friend was Wayne. I don't know if he was my first friend, but he was my first school friend and really did become my very best friend all through my public school years. My first friend may have been Keith. He was born a day before me, and my parents and his parents knew each other. My mom and his mom worked together at the phone company for years before that. My first bike was this little blue thing that I could ride around and around and around. I made a podcast about a birthday I had in about second or third grade where I got a bigger bike than that. And my first girlfriend, I don't know. Probably Mary Ellen. She's my next door neighbor. I talked about her on a podcast or two also. They moved a house up there, right next door to us, up on the hill. I was probably about 6. I think Mary Ellen went to kindergarten with me. That'd be 5. She had to be my first girlfriend. First serious girlfriend, though, was about second grade, and that was Marilyn. Her dad owned a grocery store in town, as did my dad owned a grocery store in town. But after second or third grade, Marilyn's dad moved his family to Denver, and his store stayed open. He kept running the store. And so that was the end of my sweetheart, Marilyn. I can't remember, as I got older, driving the first girlfriend I had. I had so many. It's almost like the girlfriend of the week. And I wasn't dumping them. Don't get me wrong here. I was the dumpee. I got dumped constantly. And for good reason usually. It's not that I'm too ugly, and I don't think I was way unpleasant, and I think I was fairly truthful. I just think that those girls knew better. I don't know. I don't know. I have some fond memories of dates with girls that some of them became friends, but usually I didn't date friends, you know what I mean? Firsts are very important. I was the first child in my family and the first grandchild on my mother's family side. My dad was the first child in his family, and my mother was the first child in her family. My wife Kim, first child in her family. But I had that distinction of being the first grandchild on my mother's side, and my mother's family lived in that little town I was raised in. My first child is my daughter Erin. Her first child was our first grandchild. My first job was working for my dad. My first job as I broke away from my dad's store was in a gas station, a standard station, on the east end of town. Should have stayed at the grocery store. My first car was a 1963 Ford, I think, Galaxy station wagon. It was white. Just a hand-me-down from my folks. They got a brand new Chrysler 300, so I inherited the station wagon. Now, you know, old Ron had a GTO, and I didn't think that GTO had anything on my station wagon. As I look at my life, my first house, I bought Jay's grandmother's house. I worked for Jay at the trading post, and he gave me a deal that was just hard to refuse. It was a wonderful deal that really got us started, and I appreciated it very much. That job for Jay was the best job, first job actually, I ever had that I actually loved. I loved it. Leaving there is one of the few regrets I've had in life. But you know, that's how you learn, is by making decisions that, looking back, you probably shouldn't have made the decision you did. First time I got married was the last time I got married, and that'll be 48 years this year. My first dog, really, in actuality, was Poncho. My childhood dog. He's a little Cocker Spaniel. Went everywhere with me if I wasn't riding my bike or going to school. First dog was dear to my heart after I grew up was old Baloo Dog. She was husky and shepherd mix. She lived to be 16 years old, and basically she was my family until I married Kim. And then she was part of the family until she passed away. You know, when you Google firsts and first things and list of first things, it gives you all kinds of things like Amelia Earhart crossing the ocean, first woman, the guy that was the first one to go to the North and South Pole, all this stuff. And I didn't want to have a history lesson. I just wanted to tell you some of the things rolling around in my heart. I'm hoping that this records okay, that we don't get any more of those crazy dial-up internet sounds. I don't think we will, because I'm using my old microphone. You know, old microphones are a lot like old shoes. It's just hard to get rid of them, unless they just don't work anymore. I love old shoes. Now, my wife doesn't, and she's always telling me how I look poor. And I do have some new shoes that I wear when I take her somewhere, so that I don't have to hear that and I don't embarrass her. But I feel that I'm not trying to impress anybody anymore. I never really was big on that anyway. I just want to be comfortable with my dress and comfortable with myself. I think I've achieved that in life. It's been a good life. In a few months, I'll enter the winter of my life. You break it up in 25-year increments. Once you turn 75, you must have entered winter. Now, I like winter. I do. I like it more here in the Midwest than I ever did in the mountains. And I think the only reason I really look back at winters in the mountains with this thing of I like summer better. Summers up there are beautiful, but winters are long. And after the thrill is gone, well, you've got March and April to contend with. Brown snow and always snowing, and the rest of the world's having spring. And here you are in winter. So I'll be content in the winter of my life. I don't know how long I'll live in this house of mine. I'd like to think for a long time, but I understand that as I get older, it's harder to take care of 25 acres. It is. But I'll go out there in the spring with my mowers and my weed eaters and my chainsaws and my tractor and all that stuff, and I'll putz around a little. I'll tell Kim how hard I'm working, and I'll come right in and kiss the girl that might have been the first woman I ever really truly kissed, at least with my heart. Always be kind. You'll be glad if you are. I'll be back next Wednesday. We'll chug on through 2025. Peace out.